right, let's get started. My name is Slavena Vylkova, and I'm Science Communication Manager at the Benioff Center for Microbiome Medicine at UCSF. I would like to thank the Gladstone Institute for inviting me today to give this workshop on NIH postdoc funding explained, F32 and K99 insights. It is a pleasure to talk to you today about the main funding mechanisms at NIH. And here is the outline. We'll start with some general information and then with a step-by-step process of your submitting your application, from preparing to apply to application process and recent changes to the NIH application and review process, as well as what to expect after the submission very briefly. And at the end, I will share some UCSF, primarily and NIH resources. And also, hopefully, we'll have some time for questions and answers. Please submit your questions in the chat directed to me. This meeting will also be recorded or is recorded and will be made available to you later on when it's all edited and prepared. You can find in the future the link to this recording in the QR code that is provided here, where you can currently find also a lot of resources and tips and tricks to prepare for your application. So the F32 and K99 awards at NIH are the main research mechanisms, award mechanisms that you can utilize as a postdoc. However, these are not the only ones. There are a few F awards and a few K awards that you may be eligible for. However, we'll be going through F32 and K99 as examples. An F32 award is to support promising candidates during their mentored postdoctoral training under the guidance of the appropriate faculty sponsor. It's usually tailored to younger postdocs or people that are just about to start their postdoc training. And it focuses on the training aspect, and it provides up to 3 years of support, usually in the form of stipend. The K99 mechanism, on the other hand, is tailored towards more seasoned postdocs, and it is made to facilitate a timely transition of outstanding postdoctoral researchers from mentored postdoctoral position to an independent faculty position. And this award is for up to 5 years of support that comes into 2 stages. 1 to 2 years of mentored phase that is under your current postdoc mentor's guidance, and up to 3 years of independent phase. In that, at the end of these 3 years of independent phase, it is expected from you to apply for an independent NIH support project grant funding, major research mechanisms such as R01 application or R35 application during that time period. And with that, you need to strategically place your application to highlight all these stages of your career development, from mentored to completely independent and already thinking about a major grant application mechanism. There are few eligibility requirements for these awards. For F32, there is no formal cutoff for the years into postdoc or years since you completed your PhD. However, it is required that you either have a US citizenship or a permanent residence, and there is a fixed budget to cover your candidate expenses. For the K99 award, there is a strict requirement for up to 4 years into your current postdoc position, with some exceptions. And if there are exceptions that apply to you, it is best to contact your scientific review officer to determine whether you're eligible to apply. However, you can be starting your postdoctoral position years after you completed your PhD if you had gap year or went on a different career path. That doesn't matter. It is important that you are not exceeding the 4 years into your current postdoc. US citizens, permanent residents, and non citizens are eligible to apply. However, for non citizens to be eligible, it is important that their visa status must allow stay in the USA throughout their postdoctoral phase. And there's two budget cutoffs for the mentored versus the independent phase. With the independent phase, having more resources so you can cover maybe technician position, cover some expenses for for consumables or small equipment, etc. Really to help you out, set your lab and achieve independence. Um, Additional eligibility requirements is that if you're proposing a clinical to gain experience in a clinical trial during your either F32 or K99, you as a postdoc cannot be the lead of that clinical trial. You can gain experience under the mentorship of under your mentor who will be that lead of the clinical trial. It could be also a commenter that is tied to your application, not necessarily your primary mentor. And because we have some postdocs from the industry in the audience, I would like to highlight that postdocs in the industry are eligible if their research is conducted in a setting that meets completely the NIH funding eligibility criteria and their institution supports such applications. And generally, that means that nonprofit institutions are eligible to apply. And when the mentor, which is mentoring the postdoc in the industry, is affiliated with an academic institution, which is frequently the case. Additional considerations for the F32 award is that if the candidate is proposing postdoc training in the same institution as they gained their PhD from, it needs to be made very clear what type of different experience in terms of knowledge, technical skills one can gain as a postdoc, as opposed to their PhD years. And this is easier if you're transitioning into different department or different lab that has a very different set of experimental skills that you need to gain. However, if you're continuing as the same lab as a postdoc as the one that you gained your PhD from, you really need to set yourself why you're now having a completely different type of project maybe or different skills that you will acquire during your postdoc that you haven't during your PhD. And then also it is allowed for the postdoctoral training as under the F32 award to go to a foreign institution and conduct your postdoc training there. But this needs to be very well justified. This could be, for example, if you're using a specific field site or being in a center that is unique and there is no other one in the world or in US. Additional considerations for the K99 award is that one individual cannot have more than two competing applications, career development applications that are pending review at the same time. Imagine you're a postdoc that have applied for a F32 award and now you find yourself eligible or ready to apply for a K99 award and you're preparing this application. You cannot submit the K99 application before you have results from the review process for the F32 award. You must wait for these results to come out, and as soon as these results are available to you, you can apply for the K99 award. Another consideration for the K99 award is that if you're applying for faculty position and you're offered such position before the K99 award that you have applied for has been made, you will lose both the K99 and the R00 award. So you will not receive any funding under this mechanism. So if that's the case for you, you can negotiate with the institution offering you the faculty position in to wait until you get the results from the from the K99 award. So you're able to fulfill all these eligibility requirements, but you're wondering whether you're ready to apply. Is now the best time? And the first person to ask is yourself. Is that aligning with your career goals? Are you ready? Do you have a significant achievement in your field? And are you going to be a competitive candidate for such award? Sometimes the answers are clear, and sometimes not so much. But either way, you really need to discuss any prospects of applying for F32 or K99 with your mentor. But in addition to your mentor, who is instrumental in this application process, you can also contact the scientific review officer for that application and outline the project with them. It could be in the form of a very rough draft of your specific aims and say, hey, do you think my research really is tailored to this application? Do I have a good chance? How you feel about my ideas? And they can usually give you some hints or some suggestions or whether to proceed, or there are different type of mechanism that you can apply for instead. And you can also ask past grant awardees and other people within your department, institution, or elsewhere who may be familiar with the application process. Maybe they were already awarded these grants and can give you practical tips of how to strategically plan that in your career and also given your life events. Because after all, postdoc is a very busy time in life. So you decide that you're ready to apply. So what should you do next? First and foremost, you really need to get yourself familiar with all the requirements that are needed to fulfill this submission. Usually that's found in the notice of funding opportunity and other instructions that are tied to this notice of funding opportunity. You can find additional information and really have built your application from there. So you can create a list of required documents and people that you need to coordinate your application with. Develop a timeline. Consider that this process really takes a lot of your time and you need to time it with continuing your experimental work probably and other things that are going on. And additionally, you can also obtain examples and templates both from your institution, from your mentor, or from previous people in the lab, for example, or in the department that have submitted such applications. These are great resources to start building your application. However, you need to be careful because in the beginning of this year, there were significant changes that were made to both the application and to the review process, and that may render your the examples that you're using to be outdated. And so always refer to the notice of funding opportunity for the latest and the most correct information. And if there are recent changes, they're usually very well highlighted and explained. So just to give you an example, in the beginning of this year, as I noted, on January 25th, there was a significant restructuring of how the application is handled or packaged. From 5 different categories, now it is restructured in 3 different categories. The subcategories that were repackaged, it is the same information, it's just in a different view, let's say like that. But again, if you're using templates or examples from before, especially from last year or earlier, some of the things may not be the same, and you really need to pay attention to the most recent instructions to build your application correctly. So another thing to consider that is not necessarily necessary, but certainly helps in your application is to select an NIH institute and study section. NIH has 27 institutes and centers, and most of them, but not all of them, offer F32 and K99 awards. And each institute is different because it has its own mission and different priorities. And sometimes priorities change, and institutes that previously you may not have considered for your application now prioritize research that is really tailored to your research plan, and you may consider applying there. To select the institute that best fits for your research plan, usually you go with the institute that your mentor is applying to and getting funding from most frequently. But sometimes it's not so straightforward, and especially for the K99 awards, the K99 candidate needs to be able to distinguish their research plan from the ongoing research in their postdoctoral lab. And for that, maybe your direction is to choose a completely different institute. I will give you an example with a microbial fellow, postdoctoral fellow, that is working on microbial pathogenesis, but in their research plan, there is a very strong genomics component. That fellow may decide to apply for the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the Genomic Research Institute, or the General Medical Sciences Institute. And here in this table, you can see the latest success rates and the number of applications submitted for F32 and the K99 awards. You can tell in this table that every different institute, the numbers vary depending on, and also the number of applicants vary. And that could be also considering factor when you're looking at where to apply. It's a consideration, but after all, how your research tailors to the mission and priorities of the research institute takes precedence. Then you can also dig dig a little bit more and figure out also what is your peer review panel? Who will be reviewing your application? It certainly helps to know your audience. It is not required, but I highly recommend that you look into this information. I will give you again an example with the same microbial fellow. So this fellow decides to apply for the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Within this institute, there are 3 fellowship study sections or peer review panels that may review the application. The study section A is, for example, more tailored towards immunology, B, microbial pathogenesis, and C, parasitic and fungal diseases. So for that fellow, it looks like the section B will be most suitable to apply. If that fellow follows the link, it gives you information about the previous study sections and the members that were reviewing the applications. Maybe you recognize names from your own research. Maybe you can cite their work or acknowledge the techniques that they have developed. Anything that really tailors your application towards the review panel and your audience sets you apart from others. So not only that you can create your application with your audience in mind, but you also highly recommended is that you write your specific assignment for a study section in the cover letter. Say you have determined that F07B study section is most suitable for your application. You will put that in the cover letter and request that specific assignment. The chances are your assignment request will be fulfilled. If you don't do that, your application may go in a different study section or even different institute if you don't specify the institute you want to go, your application to go to. And then this creates problems because your application will not be reviewed adequately. Remember that there are 3 application due dates for both F and K99 applications. That's in February, June, and October of 12th of each year. And that all applications are due, no exceptions, by 5 p.m. local time of the applicant organization. Imagine you miss the deadline due to power outage or any kind of event that is on your end, and you submit your application at 5:01 on February 12th. It will not be considered for that review cycle. It will be considered already for the June's review cycle. And so then at the end, your application will be reviewed at much later time point. That may harm you because postdoc time is very precious, and it may push you, if you're applying for K99, out of the 4-year window. So aside from that, you need to pay attention to various registration portals that you need to register for to be eligible for the application and to unlock, let's say like that, your forms. The good thing is that usually you contact your institutional signing official that helps you in this process. So once the registration numbers are created, you also need to share those numbers with your reference letters providers because they need to state that number to link your application to the reference letter. In addition to that, you also must register with ORCID, but this is a fast and pretty straightforward process. I will show you an example of how approximate timeline for training grant submissions at UCSF works. This is a guideline. Every signing official will give you their own timeline, but you can expect roughly the following. About at least 2 months in advance, you need to discuss the science topic with your PI and have already a draft of your specific aims. Already have the ideas in mind and initiate this process. Shortly after, you will contact your signing official to initiate all the registration, obtain all the necessary required forms that you need to fulfill, and also the timeline that your official is expecting to receive those by. You will, in parallel of creating your research and career development documents, you will need to be proactive and request letters of support and reference letters, as well as letter of institutional support. That isn't the case in the K99 award only. What is the difference between letters of support and reference letters? Reference letters are designed to speak about you from experience. Somebody that knows you well can talk about your qualifications, your potential as a scientist, your accomplishments so far, etc. Letters of support are slightly different, and they're to tell the audience that you will be supported in your future application. If you're proposing a specific technique that requires to use a specific technique that needs to use a core facility, you can obtain a letter of support from that core facility to say, hey, these resources are available to the person in mind. Or if you're proposing to gain bioinformatics skills and you will be working with a committee member that will help you with that, you can obtain a letter of support from that person saying, yes, I'll be there to help with all the bioinformatics skills that this person needs to develop. So these are the differences. In addition, the letter of institutional support are to say that the K99 candidate will be supported by the institution in their full. So this you need to prepare probably drafts of these letters and be proactive in that matter. You also need to prepare a lot of so-called auxiliary documents that you have probably not expected. And the good news is that some examples have already been made available to you either from the institution, or you can borrow some examples from your mentor and not invent things from the beginning. This include facilities and resources, data sharing forms, vertebrate animals, you name it, whatever your application needs to build in the entire package. So you need to prepare these forms well ahead because these forms will be handed to your signing official earlier than your science and training component. And why is that? It's because these administrative pieces can be checked more thoroughly by your signing official, more so than your science and career development plan. For example, your signing official can see a difference between the proposed budget and the budget justification and say, hey, these numbers are not aligning. Can you take a look at that? Or say the formatting is not of this document is not as per the requirements. Can you change that? However, your signing official will not be able to say, this experiment is not appropriate. You better find something that is more current and so on. So for that reason, the science and training component are handed to your signing official later, and they can be handed basically the day the grant application is submitted, which should be at least 1 day in advance. This is because there is an automatic check from the NIH whether all the forms are in compliance. And if there is some sort of error that is found, then these documents will bounce back with an error message. And this needs to be fixed before the deadline. Your application needs to be error-free by 5 p.m. on on the deadline day. So there are a lot of documents for each application. And what a postdoctoral fellow usually doesn't expect is the burden that all these documents have in terms of preparing. You're really focused on your candidate section, preparing your research and career development plan. And indeed, these components take the most time, but there are so many other documents that build additionally to that time. And so I propose or recommend that you allocate equal amount of time to complete all other documentations as to complete your research training plan component. And of course, you need to give also additional sufficient time for your mentor to develop the commitment to candidate mentoring and training plan, which is their component of your application. It's the same for K99 awards. There are a lot, and even more so than for the F32 application documentation that is needed, given the increased complexity of this award. So just remember to follow always the NOFO instructions, that they will supersede any other instructions that are found on the NIH website. And view your application accordingly. Make sure that everything is per requirements, because that may harm your application process. There are recent changes to the NIH fellowship application and review process, as I mentioned, that they have been implemented in the beginning of this year. And the main changes are that there is a better focus on the reviewer in three key assessments: the fellowship candidate's preparedness and potential, the research training plan, and the commitment to the candidate. So for the F32 applications, this means that the focus has been shifted primarily on training and not so much on your mentor and their achievements and capabilities to mentor you. For the K99 awards, this means that your career development and potential for independent research in the future is being emphasized. Also, there is an increased clarity and simplicity in the language in the application and review criteria. Previously, there was a confusion between who is the candidate, who is the PI, and things like that has been clarified and really simplified so everybody can follow without additional instruction. And importantly for UCSF and Gladstone as big NIH institutions is that there is reduced bias now in review by emphasizing the commitment to the candidate without the undue consideration of the sponsor and institutional reputation. So the focus from the sponsor and institutional reputation, which carried a lot of a bonus, let's say like that, for applicants from large NIH institutions, have been stripped down so that people applying from a smaller research institutions have equal chance. There is also some update to the reference letter instructions. That's a minor detail. So when you're preparing your research component, arguably the most important part is the specific aims page. You probably know this by now. This is the face of your application. The specific aims page will be read by every single member of your peer review committee, of peer review panel, and so it needs to be really setting the stage for what's to come in more details in the research plan and in the career development plan. For the research plan, you need to demonstrate innovation, address potential limitations, indicate the skills that you will gain, and relate the proposed research to your career goals. These are important considerations. And so, how you um, propose, how you explain your research really does matter. You need to be always checking whether your proposal answers three main questions. Should your work be done? Can it be done? And will it be done? If you can answer these questions effectively, your application will be very strong. I recommend the Grant Application Writers Workbook NIH version. This gives very good tips on how to write in a NIH-like language. This book is tailored towards R01 grant applications, but a lot of the tips how to, again, speak the NIH language are applicable to you as well. And use previous examples and build an extensive internal review panels of mentors, commenters, and peers and colleagues, preferably also people that are not tightly associated with your research, that can give you a different perspective, as our review will do on your application, and will help you build a stronger proposal. How you seed your plant and how you grow your application into a really rounded and nice product does matter. And so make sure that you have a very strong rationale, research approach, and how you explain your research to others. That will help you produce a successful application. This is also very important, not only just for the research, but also for the career development plan. The career development plan is as long as the research plan. And it is 6 pages where you really need to set yourself why you need this career training. What are you proposing to bring you from the place where you are at now to the future fulfilled career goals, whether it is as a faculty leader or elsewhere. And so 6 pages of career development plan is sometimes overwhelming, and that's where examples are very handy. But what you need to focus on is your current and long-term career goals, your plan for logical progression towards independence, for example, in the K99, or achieving these career goals for the F32, and systemic plan for obtaining the necessary scientific background, the research experience, and also career development activities, soft skills, etc., that will really help you be a rounded and good professional. And so you need to describe the proposed activities that should enhance your research productivity, explain why additional mentoring is needed. That is very important for the K99 award, since you've been presumably at that postdoctoral position for maybe 3 years. You really need to explain what are you missing still in terms of skills, and require this specific mentoring component that will guide you towards independence. And for that, because also you have to fill out 6 pages, I strongly recommend that you include a visual timeline with milestones. This will explain visually to the reader that you have a specific plan how to follow through with all the steps and bring you from where you are now to where you want to be. And so for the career development plan, you really need to be able to answer 2 questions. Does the training align with your goals? And are the mentorship and training activities adequate? And for the both for F32 and K99, but more so important for K99, is important to form a strong team of mentors that are readily accessible and that complement your main PI's expertise. Perhaps it's team of mentors that include a bioinformatician, an immunologist, people from different perspectives that can really help you build yourself as a well-rounded professional that can understand various types of research that you may need in the future. And then also distinguish yourself in case of the K99. Again, this is extremely important to have no major overlap with your mentor's research and to show that you're really undertaking a new career path that is unique but still complementary to your experiences so far. There are a lot of other documents that you need, as I explained, and I gave you already examples of what the letters of support and reference letters should include. And for resubmissions, you will need new reference letters from all referees again. So in those reference letters, there also need to be some sort of message of how you have developed since the last application. What else, what new have you done since your last time you applied? And there is something new about these letters of recommendation. In 2025, it was implemented that now a postdoctoral fellow does not need the reference letter from their PhD advisor. Before, this was a required component. And it is very useful to include a list of referees, including their names, departmental affiliation, and institution in the cover letter of the application so that the NIH staff can know that there is expected submission of reference letters from these individuals and to look for these reference letters should one be missing still from the application. Once you submit your application, it's a long process until you receive any kind of feedback or even get the funding. It could be even up to 20 months, depending on whether you need to resubmit your application or not, from your preparation time to receiving that. And so this is very critical, especially in the context of the timely matter, the time that you need to be in a postdoc, especially if you're applying for K99 award. This long process needs to be considered. So once you submit your application, don't just continue without doing anything actively. You really need to be proactive and start completing those career development goals and the research plan to show a progress should your application need to be resubmitted. And then you really need to explain the progress that you have made since the last application. That will be very important for considering your application further. And so with that, I would like to close by the message that you're not alone in that application process. Your good point of contact is the Office of Sponsored Research. That's where your signing official can be found. And so they're really instrumental in driving your application and submitting this application. And then there are a lot of forms and templates, some of which may be outdated and need to be you need to be careful with that, can be found at the Office of Research Development. And again, as I said, your mentor and previous lab members perhaps that have received similar funding are a good source of information and additional forms, templates, and examples. So I'm closing with the same QR code that includes the internal and external resources. And then if you have the time and are willing to share your experience about this application, please fill out a very short survey. And now I will be happy to answer your questions. I see some questions in the chat, so give me a second to review those, and then I will be happy to answer those. Um, so, so a question from Adam is, you mentioned that postdoc can submit a K99 application if they have a F32 submission pending review. Does this rule apply to early K99 awards that must be submitted in the first 2 years of postdoc experience? K99 awards can be submitted at any time during your postdoctoral training. However, it is expected that you have shown already a sufficient progress in your postdoc before applying. In general, to answer your question shortly, you cannot have two applications at the same time under review at NIH. Any type of application. So with that, yes, that will also apply that early K99 awards cannot be staggered. Would you want to obtain letters of support from a potential R00 institution? Sure. I would recommend that you look for letters of support not only within your institution but also within your collaborators. If you have established an existing collaboration and you're expecting some resources from them, that can be a good source of either a reference letter or letter of support. Anything to show that you are a well-rounded individual, researcher that have built connections inside and outside your institution will help your application. If you have a K00 or F32 and want to apply for K99, would you be able to apply before those expire? Yes, I believe so. You will be able to apply because the rule is that you cannot have two applications under review at the same time. So I assume that that would be the case, that you can apply for K99 if you have been granted an F32 and it's still valid. Do you know how to request an extension to apply for the K99 award? Yes, you will be contacting your scientific review officer, and you will be explaining your situation in case of medical reason, etc. You will need to provide some kind of documentation that basically what you need is a proof of any type of sort that you have inactive postdoctoral time, unpaid time off, anything to show that you have not been actively doing research at that given time. Yes, the presentation slides will be shared with you, I believe, after at some point, and also we are recording the presentation, so the slides will be made available to you. All the resources will be available as well as the recording. For the K99 application, can you tell me if the 4-year from PhD completion deadline refers to the deadline you apply or the deadline you receive any funding? So for the K99 application, The 4-year rule applies from the moment you start your postdoctoral training. Assuming you're starting on 1st of October of this year, you will be eligible to apply up to the end of September of 2029, no later than that, unless you apply for exclusion from this 4-year rule. The NCI Institute removed themselves from the F32 and have released a new award, K32, but they keep postponing the award. Do you have any recommendation for people doing cancer research? Yes, that's unfortunate to hear. I would what is the best strategy? I would discuss this with my mentor to first to see who may provide some guidance. It will be probably someone within NIH that will be able to provide more directed recommendation of how to go about that. And hopefully you also have additional institutes in mind to apply for instead. Passing on a message that someone shared with me, many NIHKs now use a 12 combined page for career development research strategy. I have seen ratios 3:9 and 5:7 career research. I would need to check that in details, but as far as I know, the requirement is still 6 pages for research and 3 and 6 for the career development. My recommendation is that if there is the flexibility around that, to keep it still, 5:7 career research ratio will be more appropriate than 3:9. Is there a limit to the number of times you can apply for K99? There is no limit, but again, the whole review process is pretty lengthy, and so that limits the amount of time you can apply for, because the entire process from submission to receiving some kind of notification of whether your award was granted, application was granted or not, takes about 9 months. And so with that, you probably can apply for K99 twice. My question is actually that someone received funding for the K99 mentor phase after the 4-year limit, assuming they applied before the 4-year limit. That's correct. You need to apply for the moment you submit your K99 award, needs to be before your 4-year limit. If you're granted the award, and you explained why you need mentoring past these 4-year limits, and it was approved by the peer review panel, that's great. And I believe that's the end of all our questions. I am available for additional questions if you would like to ask me personally. Again, this presentation will be shared with you at a future date. You can also access the internal and external resources, and we'll be sharing the slides from this presentation with you very shortly. Thank you for participating today. Please fill out the 2-minute anonymous survey to help us improve and guide us how we can help you in the future with similar topics. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.